there's many layers to power flows, and it's important to kind of stack them one on top of the other. Just like a good workout program, you want to do the same thing here. So the first one was to kind of get you in touch with them and make you familiar with the concepts, such in the case of Nyy, we're doing today, abstraction and pattern surfing, improvisation, basically the lexicon of that power. And so in this case, we're now going to explain why the distinct signal buoyancy is there and how each one of the power flows is a complement and a component of that. Well, we need to define buoyancy. In this case, buoyancy is used metaphorically to mean light, difficult to keep down, difficult to submerge, difficult to keep grounded. So what does that mean? Where does it come from? Well, usually I think a good metaphor for that would be the very substances, for example, of ice, water, and gas for H2O. That's a really good way of looking at it. The water is more expansive of a form than the ice, and therefore it's more buoyant. It will actually spread and burble up to the surface. If you have a bunch of ice and some of the ice is water, the water will go up. Okay, if you have some of that water getting hot enough that turns into steam, that will go up. So basic premise of buoyancy is more expansive things, which have more distance in between their particles, actually take up more space, less volume, and rise. This is kind of basic physics, and actually that's why it's a really good metaphor and why I like to use it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's where the concept of possibility comes in. When you introduce the concept of possibility, you are inflating anything that is touching with more than it currently possesses. And this is a difficult concept to kind of articulate, but I'm going to do my best I can, and I'm a big fan of Nyy, so it's just good stuff. It vibrates. There's a vibrational kind of aspect to it, and it relates also to sixth sense. We mentioned it there, but really there's a general vibrational element to Nyy and to buoyancy. When particles vibrate, they spread, and when they spread, they get lighter and rise. Thus buoyancy. Does that make sense? That's why a raft floats, because it's full of a more expansive substance, particle-wise, than the water is. So the possibility will cause. It's kind of funny. I don't want to make this a negative, but it might help in some instances to actually explain the modulation power of Vi. Vi holds things super where they are, and that there's a great value to that, and I think everyone knows the value of holding things exactly where they are. That's cool, okay? I mean, that has power, of course. But all the pot powers are equally important, and Nyy is one that is not given as much due because it's more difficult to define. But its role is as important, it's super important, and it is to move things. It's the exact opposite of Vi. It wants them to vibrate, it wants them to come out of their moorings, it wants them to expand their molecules to get light and go up. To unroot. Vi roots. Buoyancy is basically a metaphor for unrooting. So we'll look at it, that's the concept. Now we'll start having some practice. If you have Nyy, for example, talk some Nyy alphas here, you're Nyy, using the sixth sense. That's going to add, as we already mentioned earlier in the power flows, a vibrational element. In that sixth sense notices imminent potentiality, both before, during, and just after any kind of sensory event, any kind of real-world event. It can even be a thought event. But just before, during, and just after is that vibrational thing we mentioned, so I won't spend too much time there. But that adds what I'll call the helium factor. Vibration is sort of like a metaphysical helium. It adds a buoyancy, because if you sense something might happen, something could be done with just now, or it may have just passed, it brings a, similar to V, an emergency, or not emergency, it's the wrong word, urgency, that's the right word. It brings an urgency. There might be something here, something not seen in this case. And that's why it's more buoyant than, say, V. V also gets excited by the fact that stuff's happening. But Nyy is reaching out. The vibrational element means it's always going to be reaching beyond what is seen and happening. That starts the expansiveness. That starts the helium factor that makes kind of like the air balloon go up. And that's why, for example, those that are around a person like this, we'll start talking about how buoyancy affects people in a positive way. Having someone in your role-playing games, having an adventurer in your party who has Nyy Alpha means that there's a great chance of encounters of possibility that are around that would have been missed without a Nyy Alpha in the party. But with a Nyy Alpha in the party, there becomes a much higher probability chance that opportune things will become aware of. So the entire group, besides just the Nyy Alpha, they benefit from that. There's a, ooh, something might come in, something might pop up. Of course it might, if a Nyy Alpha's around. Does that make sense? That begins it. The sixth sense, that alertness to what is not seen and is sort of happening or could happen, that makes you buoyant, but anyone who's around that and is a part of the bubble you're creating, they benefit from having that awareness. Because otherwise, everything is just what it is. And Nyy is the opposite of that. So a person who has, for example, a Nyy Alpha, or those who are in the company of a Nyy Alpha, that's not so. Sixth sense is never looking at it as it is. It's looking at what it's becoming, or what it just was becoming, or what could be jumped off of from there. So this is why Vi is modulated by Nyy. That caused an uneasiness with staying where you're at. But in the case of those who have Nyy high up in their priority, it's a pleasant uneasiness. It's an uneasiness of like, why are we sitting here? Why don't we go down by the lake and see what's down there, or go around there? And it's that kind of uneasiness. The uneasiness of just sitting around camp. Okay, so sixth sense is going to lead you to leave camp for reasons other than just stuff. Because there will be V and Vi reasons to leave camp. Because, well, that's the time we're supposed to do it, that's the trail, it's getting dark. But those are very literal reasons for changing. But sixth sense is going to keep a very interpretive reason for moving. So you're at the camp, sixth sense may interpret a friend saying something as an opportunity. But that's only there because the sixth sense saw it. No one else is seeing it, and technically neither are the trees or the ground or the temperature in the air. Those things aren't noting that. Only Nyy. They said only Nyy is noting that there's actually something else here. Okay, so that makes a heightenedness. Okay, so that's the buoyancy. Continuing on is abstractions and getting the gist. That's a huge one. With sixth sense, you're kind of tracking what could be there. As soon as that happens, some things are going to be more interesting than others. In the case of Nyy users, the things that are more interesting, if you hold your mind on something for even a fraction of a second, because you Nyy really fast, abstractions will begin. So sixth sense just makes you very alert, similar to V is very alert. But with Nyy, as you're looking around, what you're hungering for, the thing the sixth sense is actually trying to look for, is abstraction opportunities. Okay, abstraction opportunities are very real. They're extremely powerful, but they are intangible. And they only exist if you possess the correct operating software to see them. The question of them being there is not a question. The only question is, do you have the operating software, in this case Nyy, to see abstraction opportunities? It's very much like being in a Sims video game. And there's all kinds of layers to the video game, like X-ray vision and things like that. And if you have those powers, then the world shows those things to you. But if your characters don't possess those powers, then they don't look like anything's there. In the case of Nyy, if you're walking around with a Nyy Alpha, or you are a Nyy Alpha, then as you walk through a building, there will be spirits. As you look at the triangle at a museum, you'll see triangle-ness. You'll see a pyramid-ness in the pyramid. These are spirits of power that can be pulled out and used for anything else. This massively starts boosting up the buoyancy again, because considering what is tangibly there, no other power can really do that. Nyy is the closest, but it is second to Nyy this way in taking what is here right now and making it something else positive. Does that make sense? A value added. So the abstractions are a big deal with that. They actually basically make the Nyy user able to keep possibilities coming in even when the environment isn't changing. For example, if you were to look at the pyramid, you'd get pyramidness. But if you kept looking or kept playing with the idea, if the demonstration kept moving you of the museum curator or whatever, you would go beyond pyramidness. You would go to Egyptness, and then you go to like peopleness, and then peopleness with triangleness, and then peopleness with triangleness with planetness, and that with cosmosness, and the abstractions would just keep coming. And that's a huge part of the buoyancy, is you can just keep, similar to Nyy, you can just keep going. There's no tangible limits on the interpretive powers. They don't work that way. They're limited really by jump points and the ability of the user to recognize jump points and jump with them. They're like tokens to get you to go. So if you recognize your power and you think, I'm going to abstract now, because I did that kind of stuff all the time, use my Nyy and my other's Nyy, but I have to think of it. Sometimes I'll be like in a bad mood, or I'm bored, I'm sitting around somewhere and there's something to do, I'm in line or something, and I'll think, wait a minute, oh yeah. And then I'll start looking around for things that can move my mind. Nyy is extremely good at this, and what will happen is abstractions from boxes hang on the aisle that aren't really interesting to you as a product, but they have things on them, they have words on them, they have concepts on them, they have characters, they have things, whatever going on, and you can abstract all of that and you now have stuff. That's another one, is two things can be buoyant. One is it's lighter, or more stuff moving into a contained or same size area. So if you have a boat and it is heavy, but underneath it is a geyser, and the geyser comes up and continues to go, what will happen is the boat will come up and a lake will form under the boat. This happens all the time when lakes actually get dried and they get filled up. Does that make sense? Okay, so abstractions kind of just start lifting everything up to a let's change now kind of atmosphere. And that innately makes everything light, which again will make Vi nervous, because things are given weight in order that you don't move them, because you move important things, and Vi has its reasons for thinking this. If you moved like part of a suturing mechanism while you're in the middle of an operation, that'd be bad. So understandable, it is very bad to move things that you shouldn't move. So of course. However, all the pod powers would go to an extreme if they did not have something modulating them with its own agenda that went another way. Pack ratting, taking in everything and holding on to it as if it has equal value, because they don't. And you know how you tell the value of things? By weighting them. Seriously, the old thing, how you weight them? Nyy is very good at adding buoyancy to an environment and seeing what could be moved, because as much as there are always things that should not be moved, there are things that should and could and would be great opportunities if they were moved, and let's do it. Let's see what would happen. Next, the brainstorming. With the abstractions, you now have stuff that wasn't there before, so the environment is filling up. And again, everyone's powers do this, and we call this peaking. So everyone has a peaking and everyone has a shine. But the difference with Nyy is the peak and the shine, similar to Nyy but in a different way, in a more outward and optimistic way, it's based on things that people can't see. So creatures who are doing this, they seem to have a energy surge, a feeding source, something that's giving them a lift energy-wise that other people aren't seeing. It seems like they're feeding off of nothing. That seems buoyant. Does that make sense? Anytime someone says it floats, like how is something just floating like that? That seems very unusual and cool, almost magical. And that's why Nyy is often given a very magical quality. Nyy and Nyy kind of get that. It's because they're mainly concerned with seeing things that aren't easily seen or aren't actually technically there. Okay. With brainstorming, once the spirit forms are abstracted out of things, the desire to play. So now more buoyancy, because once you have all these basically genies in your hand, your mind, you have to play with them. And there's a giddiness, there's a playfulness. That's why there's a very youthful quality to Nyy and Nyy in its own way also, because it's like a child. There's a very childlike quality to Nyy in that it basically is getting magic tokens. It's getting stuff to play with that is not physically there, but it is there for the Nyy to register. So, what's next here? Crossing, textualizing, idea juggling. This is another thing that'll make the buoyancy happen. As you got the spirits to play with, and of course you're going to, where do you play with them? Not nearby. That's why Nyy makes great scouts. Once you have spirits and you recognize, I have a universal spirit of abstraction, I could use it on anything. Why use something nearby? So that's why Nyy can be kind of crazy sometimes. It's going to run in a lot of different directions mentally and physically in order to find all the possibilities that I could use it on. Because once you pull pyramidness out of the pyramid, why just use it on what's at your desk? Why not go on the internet, right, and see all the things since you have it on your mind now that you could use it on, and you could get a really ultra cool ones. In fact, ultra cool ones, plural. That's another thing. That will cause a plurality. It will cause an expanding of the cross-contextualizing, which is go away from base camp. In this way, it's very different than Nyy. Nyy is very insular. Nyy is the opposite. Once it gets its spirits, like, ooh, I need to share these spirits, and I need to see how many things the spirit form of abstractions would want to play on. So it wants to run around and actually, see all the things it can connect to. That, like heating up air, right? When you make the particles go further away from each other, the air takes up more space and it gets lighter. So cross-contextualizing also expands and makes things get lighter. But when it does that, when it expands and gets lighter, it also touches new things. And that spirit form that already kind of lit up a little buoyancy, if it does cross-contextualize with something else, it can get another burst of buoyancy, and so more air, more expansiveness, optimism, risk-taking. So let's say you're going to go try to fly, because Nyy tries to fly, and that's why it's so awesome. We kind of got ourselves a little air balloon now, don't we? So now we're going to try and make this air balloon fly. So we have to kind of run it off a cliff. If anyone's ever done that kind of thing, where you run something off a cliff on purpose, such as BMX biking or things like that, I don't do that kind of stuff, but if you're into that thing, or anything where you're trying to make it to the other side, a backflip on scary ice for figure skaters, they'll all tell you the same thing. You gotta go for it. You don't go for it, you almost ensure that you drop on your head. If you don't want to drop on your head, you have to go for it. So that adds buoyancy, because Nyy users, they don't take a timid runoff. If they're gonna do it, they fucking run off. Excuse my language, I'm sorry. Anyway, they run off. And that increases the chance they're gonna make it. Because they're like, I think I have enough buoyancy, I think I can make it from here to over there. I wonder what's over there. And that desire is much more powerful than the fear of the distance. The distance seems small, so they go for it. And that going for it often has to do with whether they make it or not, because sometimes they land on the other side, they're like, wow, I barely made it. But they did, seat in the pants, and the fact they went for it is how they got it. If they had not gone for it that full, they would not have made the jump. So when someone goes for things like that, as you can see with the other analogies here, more buoyancy. Because they're not going to make it a little jump and make multiple little jumps. No. They're going to try and make it in one jump. That's big, it's long, and it's a lot of space from the origination point. So all these things, you're noticing an expansion of particles from each other. In this case, it's you as a particle expanding from the land you were on. You're not going to try to expand your particle over to a land base or another particle far away that looks like it might be cool. Let's see. Trend tracking. Okay, you're still going to jump off and you're going to do it full bore. That's so awesome. Oh, and I'll go back here real quick, just overall, is these things are all being experienced by the Nyy user, but also by those in the Nyy bubble. Because if you see someone jump and they make it, first of all, the fact they tried and made it will make you want to do it. If they try and fail, if they got really close, you're like, you know what? They didn't make it, but actually I think they probably could in a second try. I think I could. It's possible. It's important. If someone jumps and make it 95%, but they're trying on something that's unprecedented, all of a sudden like, whoa, it's doable, and it'll get done. Nyy has a big thing of doing that. It's why one of the things that I'm going to later about Nyy, it really inspires Nyy, is once you jump and you show light in that end of the cave, you can see what's over there. Even though you didn't get it right the first time, now I see it. There's stuff over there. Well, now we're going to go find out what's over there. And again, that urge to what? Move. Because the light was shining over somewhere that didn't look like there was anything there, and now people see it. It's in their heads now. What's over there? There's my stuff there. So, buoyancy for the group as well. Now you're going to run off the cliff or the building, whatever your buoyancy. You can go farther if after you leap further out there. Have you seen the video games? This is so much like Nyy, where like Super Mario Brothers, it jumps, but when it jumps in the air, you can actually jump twice. It's metaphysically impossible, but everyone loves it about Mario Brothers, and it's called the double jump. Are you familiar with this? And after almost all video games use the double jump. Everyone loves the double jump, and Nyy is the double jump. You jump once from the floor into the air, and then in midair you somehow jump again, jumping off of nothing. Nyy can do that. And one of the main things it uses for this is trend tracking, track jumping. Because once you're in the air is very comforting to Nyy. It likes being up there. It feels safe and has a good ability to float down and not hurt itself. So it doesn't get overly concerned with falling or getting lost like other powers do. For this reason, while it's up in the air, it can feel nuances in it that other powers can't, because they're just scared because they're falling. So birds, because they're not afraid of falling, what can they do? They can track wind currents. I don't track wind currents, neither does any other animal jumps off a cliff because they just fall too fast. They're like, ah, I'm falling, okay? But if you're a bird or you're a human who puts on those suits that allows you to glide, you're not actually just plummeting. So if you're actually sort of floating, and the buoyancy so far is allowing that, it allows for noting that the air is not just air. And this is where Nyy gets very nuanced. There are, just like water, solid stuff, kind of V, there are actually like these currents going in and out of it. And so you can find better ones. And if you actually do, like birds, you can go a lot farther with Nyy. A skillful Nyy user can, for example, when your Nyy gets very excited, you do things on the internet, and I think before you started this training, you were a bit random about it. Now, the internet always gave your Nyy good stuff, but it could be random exactly how good it is. Over time, you've actually developed different things, like your morning ritual that you like to do with the celebrities you like and so forth, and realizing that when I have this Nyy and it wants to bounce on something and wants to jump, if I put on that playlist, that play is like a current. It likes that current, it will stay buoyant longer. That makes sense? So buoyancy can be expanded and extended if you know how to conquer fire, tend to it. If you tend to the buoyancy, you can do that. So a bird who's in the air, who pays attention to the air currents, can go much further with much less energy. So when you think of Nyy can not just jump, it can literally fly once it learns how to ride currents. That's how all birds do it. Because just beating the wings, you can get up. That's kind of like the initial ones, and that's important. That's like abstraction. That is brute, raw, creative power, and you generate buoyancy. That's kind of the bird getting out of the tree. When you see that, they kind of just flap their wings and they get up into the air. And then they can ride. They can ride the currents. And that's how it keeps going down to the rest of the stuff. Improvisation. Improvisation is kind of a continuation of the trend tracking with the wind currents. Wind currents are almost like creatures. They have energy, they give vibration, they make sounds, and so you can kind of like notice them. So with just the trend tracking, you can sort of jump from one to the other and glide on it. But we're gonna go deeper now. We're talking like maximum buoyancy here, we're getting almost. You can stand on the current, like standing on a cloud. You'll start, and this is in video games too, you'll see it, where you jump from one rock to another, but sometimes in more advanced parts of the game, you don't jump on rocks, you jump on like clouds or globules of water or bubbles of air. And what happens is the hero jumps on it, but it starts to sink into it unless it jumps again. Does that make sense? I'm going crazy, this is fun. Anyway, improvisation is like that. So the trend track, you kind of like float, and then when that wind is gone or taking as far as you want, you can kind of like hop over to another wind current, kind of like riding a train system. You kind of ride one for a while, you jump on the next one, you go very, very far and never touch ground. Because in this analogy, ground is kind of like the literal what's going on. But we mentioned Nyy has a lot to do with concepts and ideas and conversations. So there are like these intangible things. They're definitely there, but they're not necessarily five senses there. But they are there, and therefore they can be tracked and they can be floated on. But they can also be improv'd on. They do possess a substance. For example, if I say something to you right now, a sentence, and when I do so, it has its literal meaning. And you could address that. And we mentioned this sometimes in comedy, that Nyy, the kind of comedy Nyy uses, it's very improv, and you always see it in the way it responds to things thrown at it, comments. That sentence has one to maybe two ways of being interpreted. literally. But you could interpret it 5, 10, maybe more ways if you were using Nyy. Anyone can do this. Everyone should be aware of this. Everyone has the power of Nyy. When you hear a sentence, you know what the sentence meant. You know what the person meant when they said it to you or when they asked the question. So everyone does register the logical and literal meaning of that. But there's also, for example, an emotional meaning. We're not going to get that today. But there's also an interpretive meaning. For example, in that sentence, I could say a noun. And that noun means exactly that in that sentence. But those who know expansive thought can connect that that word actually giggle means something kind of funny or naughty or crazy in another language. That's not relevant to what the person said, but it's there. This gets to the vibrational aspect. So in jokes, there are multiple ways. A comedian will tell you this, especially those who use Nyy. If someone says something to you, you could respond back playing on their words, but you could play it in a very G-rated way. PG, R, XXX. All are technically there. These are possibilities that kind of hover around anything that happens. So improving can do that. And it's like a cloud. Once that word or sentence was said, temporarily there's a cloud of connecting analogies and metaphors and clever riffs and anecdotes that are there once that was said. I think anyone knows humor will understand what I'm saying. If you brought that in a few seconds later, it's not funny or relevant anymore. That cloud is just there for a moment when that happens. So it's like air. Air is like this. When that happens, air can hit like steel. Anyone should be able to tell you this, who knows physics. You can blow open mountains with air if it's going hard enough. So when it comes to buoyancy, buoyancy can lift anything. Buoyancy can lift, 747s. But it has to keep going. If it stops, then it drops. That's the main thing. Okay, so with the power flow of Nyy, you want to learn how to get up in the air, find the currents, and ride them, and also be able to jump off of them. So with improvisation, there's the ability to do tricky maneuvers. For example, birds do this who are very skillful at hunting. They will, hope you guys, if you can hear that, that's another good reason to be happy. That's Christina Jaini. She's singing, she's very happy. So if you hear her singing in the background, that's cool, and we should let her do that and be happy. For the next one, the improvisation, I was going to say something on that is...
Tricky maneuvers?
Yes. Is improvisation, is birds who are used to doing the jumping from the airflows. One thing that they can do, which is really kind of cool, is they use the airflows to actually pull off advanced maneuvers in hunting prey. It's really kind of cool. The birds don't just treat the airflow as something to ride. It's like a pillow. They'll run at prey or things like that, or even things they want. If you need to be not even at prey, it can just be gathering, hunting, gathering, just all violent here. It can be happy. But they use denser air pockets as breaking points. They'll literally, kind of like an ice skater who's building a lot of speed, they'll careen in the air. They can build up a lot of speed, superhuman scary speed, do things, and they'll run into different air pockets, and they know they're doing this. They'll chase prey into air pockets that have a lighter or greater density than other air pockets, because it will discombobulate you. If you're running at one air current speed and it suddenly shifts, it throws you off. Nyy is very good at shifting. When air pressures go up and down, over, Nyy likes that, it's fun. Most other powers, all of the power except for Nyy, it discombobulates them. It's like being thrown all around upside down. It messes with your sense of gravity. Nyy is great with that, with scrambling and finding itself, especially in abstract sort of idea ways. See, pattern surfing, bridge building. If you extend the air currents, they become like tracks. And if you can connect enough of them, like the great migrating birds of this planet, you can actually trend track improving for food and various other maneuvers on the way all around the world. They do this all the time. There are birds that actually, they literally migrate near the entire circumference of the earth. They do this all the time. And the way they're able to do this is, it's not just these ones. These little currents actually add up to the overall currents of the area. The overall currents of the area add up to the overall currents of the planet. And in those currents, there are seasons of them. That stuff that Nyy can track and can jump to, it's still a way of improvising because it changes a little from season to season, but it's kind of like this amorphous little crazy suit that Nyy is very skillful at jumping on. There's a path in there. Now for most other people it just looks like a crazy mess, but no, there's actually a path in there and you can go great distances this way. And birds are able to do that. They're basically able, for them, it might as well be a highway. Although it's completely intangible, these various overlapping wind currents that they can jump, 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 because they can do that, it's like a road. It's like a yellow brick road for them. So that's kind of what Patton's doing bridge building. They live part of their life on one continent. And then during certain times of the year, they've learned that they need to and can get up from that continent and actually ride certain wind currents that happen, let's say, one time a year, and they can ride that wind current over to another continent. This takes weeks, months sometimes. Then they hang out there for a while. And then when it's time to move, again, Nyy is all about it's time to move, let's move. It's time to move, the winds have changed. And they get up in the air and they migrate back to the other place that they spend their time at. And so that's very much an analogy. So Nyy with airborne creatures is kind of a metaphor we play with a lot because it fits a lot. Creative energy, contagious enthusiasm. Well, I'm going to continue this bird analogy, and it very much relates to being a scout and also a explorer. Nyy users, they love exploring, and there's something that happens from that. First of all, when you like to explore, it kind of makes other people want to explore because it puts a hunger in them they didn't know was there. They perhaps already had a five senses hunger for different things, whether it be food or structural support or protection from the elements. But you know what? I am kind of bored. And I could be not bored and excited over here. That's not a tangible thing. I think most humans would recognize it's true. You're not in a physical way hungry, but your mind is hungry. I'm bored. So Nyy can find more interesting things. So it naturally wants to do that, and because it can go, as we show here, all the way to bridge building, should you desire to be unbored, you can travel anywhere you want. You can build bridges from continents, from planets to planets even. Does that make sense? So there's a great feeling of, if I want to move, I can. And so that inspires other people as well to feel that way. It does something else too. Nyy has a tendency to always be very familiar because it connects things, but it's also very unfamiliar because it's connecting it from places that weren't there before or weren't talking before. So let's talk about the birds. The birds actually migrate from one continent. They travel the air currents all across the great ocean to over here. What do you think that does to all the other animals? It appears that a bunch of stuff just showed up out of nowhere. There's all these birds, and they can be food source for some animals, they can be mating sources, they can be a source of all kinds of effect on the botany and so forth, and it just showed up, this is the main thing, apparently, what? Out of nowhere. All those powers before that let you lift up, get buoyant, and then travel greater and greater distances without touching land. Because of that, when you land places, the further and further you land from where you started from, the people and creatures that see you land, you're like, it's alien, and it can be in a very cool way. Vi sees it in a bad way because Vi tends to like things it knows. But the other pod powers that are not Vi, and the ones that are more conducive to Nyy, which there many of them are, it's like, whoa, all this stuff, it's almost like an alien ship just landed. There's all these toys and technology and things to talk about that weren't here before. That causes you see me now, a great deal of excitement. So all of a sudden someone came into the village and like, they got these things, these foods and these spices, and they have these cool words they're using, they learn from these other lands, and it's all here. So Nyy has the ability to kind of bring a lot of diversity, we'll get into later, into one area, and that like always is an instigator of change, instigator of new ideas, increasing buoyancy, change, initiation, which is kind of all those things together. When you combine them all, I already kind of set up there naturally, I wasn't going there on purpose, but you go to the village, and now say a village is being dropped in on by a Nyy traveler. So the Nyy traveler shows up there, and there's all this creative energy and contagious enthusiasm. Not only is that brought in, but the Nyy user can go up through their raw power and take flight from there again whenever they want. They can restart the power flow. So not only have they gone all the way across the world and landed and go, holy crap, and people are like, wow, who is this thing? What's going on? They also, like an astronaut or pilot just landed in their fields, they can get in their plane and leave again. And so there's a great deal of excitement of when they're going to go and can I go with them and where are they going to go and those kinds of things. So there's from the beginning to the end of the power flow, it causes change, and change makes things move. And when they move, they expand away from each other. When you have expansion, you have lightness, you have lift, you have buoyancy. Those are power flows, but since we're doing the second series, I'll go a little more material. There's a little more in Nyy, which is called the counterbalances. These counterbalance with Vi. I'm not going to get overly into that too much right now, but there's a spectrum of these three things. We have open-minded with gullible, irrepressible, fickle, and diverse with scattered. They're like a spectrum of the way that Nyy can be interpreted. It tends to be interpreted in a very positive way. For example, it's seen as open-minded and irrepressible and diverse by Nyy. And it's going to be seen more often as gullible, fickle, and scattered by Vi, with the other pod powers having sort of like a in-between opinion there. So this does relate to the buoyancy again, though, because there's opinions that the powers share towards it. When it comes to, I'm sure the positive, I'm going to be negative in here as well, because I want to be as realistic as I can. You know, my man Frazetta, I want to keep it real here. Open-minded. When something or someone is open-minded, they themselves possess buoyancy because they could be added to. It sounds simple, but it really needs to be highlighted. If you're open-minded, it means the environment or the situation or people could add to you. You're open to being added to. Because of that, you also add buoyancy to other people because they see you as someone that they could do that with. They see you as a person they could talk to, a person they could run an idea by, maybe even a crazy one. That lightens them. That might be a heavy enough of a load that with most people they would not have tried to talk about it. It would just been, no, better not, better not. Nyy will get a person more than anything else to go, okay, I have this crazy idea, and then Ny's like, tell me your crazy idea. And that's really cool. Bad side, gullible. There's also buoyancy, unfortunately, that attracts predators. Because buoyancy lifts things up, it feels very good. So there can be a tendency for people to want to trap Nyy, almost like you would try and trap a helium balloon. And I think you kids should know this. If not, I'm going to teach you a lesson my parents did. Always let the helium balloon go before it deflates. Don't keep it around trying to hold that helium balloon. Day after day, lose its helium until it's dead. Nice going. You let the helium balloon go, and it goes up in the air, and that's what it's meant to be. That's its destiny. If you try and take it away, you're robbing it of its destiny. And if you do that knowingly, just because you think, well, fine, they're helium balloons, and I can do that. I can attach them to my arm, and I can have hundreds of them, and I can make them fly me around. That's a villain, and fuck you. So just know that. That's why a lot of Nyy users go with being jaded. A lot of them don't even think of themselves as being like, what are you talking about, gullible? I'm not. They're like, it's because it's such an ugly way for the world to treat that, and Nyy gets treated bad in that way, and I want that to stop, so hopefully this will begin that. That buoyancy is needed. If you take advantage of the buoyancy and make it feel gullible for lifting everyone up or lifting things up, it won't do it. It'll be scared to. It'll hide it. And that it won't be buoyant, the creature that has its native power, and all the people who should be benefiting from the native power, they don't get it either. So don't do that to Nyy users. Next, irrepressible versus fickle. Irrepressible means that, for example, when you jump from village to village, you fly from village to village, they're always going to try to keep you there because you're really spiffy. Nyy is very cool, and so people tend to treat Nyy like a magic lucky charm. And it is. But you can't hold on to it. You have to let Nyy do what it does. Nyy has a life of its own. It's not there to be luck for something else. It has its own Nyy destiny, which is to go and seek possibilities. Now, if you're around Nyy when it's doing that, yes, you'll get lucky. That's a cool power of it, but that's not for you. That's important. That's for Nyy. You can't take that from them. That's robbery. That's a kind of like psychic vampirism. So there can be a tendency for some people to see Nyy as being very fickle because it doesn't want to stay places. You're not obligated to, and Nyy says that in the psyche for everyone. Some people have it higher than others, but everyone has it in there. Everyone has that power, and it's supposed to say, no one's allowed to say I have to stay a place if I don't feel I should have to stay in a place. And that can be physically or in the mind. You know what I mean? Like staying away from things that your mind wants to follow. Nyy is going to chase what it wants to chase. If it didn't do that, it wouldn't find all the things that we can't find without Nyy finding it for us. Does that make sense? If it stayed in the village like everyone wants it to, it would stop being Nyy. It would lose its magic. It would stop being shiny. It would stop floating. And great, we killed magic. So don't do that. So Nyy is going to need to move as it moves. Nyy needs to explain itself some. That's why it does have to have attachment to the powers. But that doesn't mean that it should be held down. It should be attached to something that it lifted once. That is an assumption people do, which is wrong. Nyy is allowed to lift something and then move over here and lift that, and move over here and lift that, and you can't hold on to it, keep saying, lift this again, lift me again, lift that thing again. This is something, for example, that a lot of Nyy alphas do when they over-project in a bad way. They kind of like, lift me, lift me, lift me, lift me, and that's not, you can't ask a person to do that. You should just be happy when the Nyy is buoyant and be glad that it's lighter when the Nyy is doing its thing. But if you ever try to grab it, then you ruin it and bring it down, or you won't grab it a lot of times because Nyy is very clever and it will run away. You will chase away the shiny floating magic thing, and that's kind of stupid. Diverse. This goes back to all things before self-expanding, because there's all this cross-contextualizing and bridge building and going all over. Nyy is basically connected in the real world and also throughout the psyche more than anything else. Nyy is the most inclusive. Nyy is the most connected of all the powers. So in the psyche and outwardly, it has the most fingers in the most cookie jars. So again, this adds buoyancy because it's the joy, the pleasure, the exquisite pleasure of actually having 5 cookie jars of ideas or possibilities and not actually having chosen one yet. In fact, once you narrow it down to one choice, that's kind of like a pleasurable meal. But then you immediately must generate, through abstractions, many, many more. That's how Nyy works. It generates a lot of possibilities and then it works them down to a few it likes, it eats, and then immediately has to go in the air again. It lands when it eats. It's kind of a bird. When it comes down, it eats its food, but then it likes to get back up in the air again. That can make people think that Nyy is scattered, and Nyy has to worry about that, of course. You want to watch these things, but I'm going to say the positive side now. Is Nyy often has the issue, and those who have Nyy have to watch out for this, of people trying to possess it. Because Nyy is supposed to go where it goes, and those that love Nyy in the psyche of the people they know, they should respect that that's how it works. That it's meant to roam, it's meant to walk this earth, it's meant to go kind of gypsy style. So that doesn't mean they're living a scattered life. Nyy lives in the air like birds, so if you think about it as humans, they kind of live abroad. If it's not physically, it can still be with ideas. They'll be jumping on these ideas one day and these ideas the other. And this is kind of relates to Nyy in that one way. To understand Nyy, you have to understand that all those scattered tributaries, as long as the tributaries to the original source don't break, because that is scattered. When you spread out so thin that you actually break and then you actually don't know where you are anymore and you kind of fly off. But as long as you actually are expanding out and everything still connects back to the center of the Nyy, origination point, then that is a tree. That's life. All the pod powers are kind of genie, a kind of creature that you really should learn to love in yourself and everyone else. And the Nyy genie moves around like an air elemental. It's always moving. That's what it does. If it was around staying still, you should be concerned about your Nyy genie in yourself and others. That means it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's kind of like you have like a really cool dog that's meant to run really fast. That's how it's built. And you keep it in the house, and day after day it gets decrepit and it isn't doing what it was meant to be doing. You wouldn't want to do that to a creature. You want to actually let do what it does. So think of these as like little genies you have. And the Nyy genie, it moves. And you know what? I'm going to use it. It doesn't just move. It teleports. It is because I use the analogy of birds and other things, and that analogy does fit, but those are still in the end physical analogies. Nyy really works with ideas. So it kind of is an idea, and then it gets that, and that jumps it here. But that's intangible, so it's very much like the internet. You jump from one intangible thing to another intangible thing. That may look scattered to a person who's looking over your shoulder, not if the Nyy user knows what they're doing. They're following a case, and they're jumping on a multitude of sites and things, but they know what they're doing. They actually are on a wind current. They're chasing something. Does that make sense? And so as long as they know what they're doing, they're not scattered. And that will add buoyancy, because when someone goes out that far, if you don't have Nyy yourself or not that high, what's going to seem like is they keep bringing in this random stuff. It's not random, it's just it's from so far afield that it's going to have a bit of an alien quality to it. The alien quality, the exotic quality, the change initiation quality of Nyy is its magic. Again, if your air genie Nyy kept coming back without stuff you'd never heard of before from faraway lands, well, that's not a very good Nyy genie. To make sense to you, why would you want your genie to be? Why would you want it to be like that? You'd want it to be constantly informing you of stuff you didn't know, things that may change plans. That's probably why Nyy likes it. I like things that are game changers. Game changers are cool. Other people need to be a little cooler with that. It's cool the game gets changed. It's changed for better. So be more open to Nyy. Ny's cool.